Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to the Shy Peace Show. Today, the 5th day of November. Can you believe it already? Of the year 2019. The Shy Peace Show is brought to you by the Peaceful World Movement. I'm your host, Dr. Peter St. Jean, and tonight we have, as usual, special guests with Dr. Jack Surridje. Jack, thank you for joining us on the show tonight.
My pleasure.
A scientist, a geneticist that's going to talk to us about fishing. Fishing tonight. I wanted to learn more about fishing because I was speaking to Jack some time ago after we did a show last year that was very well received. We were talking about genetics and sports.
Right.
And then we had a lot of calls. For those of you who tonight we won't be having calls tonight because we don't have our assistant on the phone with us tonight. But we'll be able to, hopefully, if you have any questions, you can feel free to link us up on our website, or you hopefully just enjoy the ability to listen to the show with us and participate as you can. So, Dr. Jack Surridje, tell our viewers again who you are.
Well, I'm trained as a biologist, geneticist. That's my academic area. I've also been a coach for most of my life, and just happen to have a passion for fishing. That's my recreational sport. So I would say of my hobbies, this is number one.
You know, I should go back and look at last year's show because today we are matching, huh?
How about it?
Yeah, we have the turtlenecks and all that going on.
We got the memo.
I'm gonna button out this one so I look cool like you, right? We got the memo. Maybe last year, last year you had that. You gave me that hoodie, and I was
right.
That hoodie.
Get you some gear.
Yes. So tell us about that, because I was fascinated, because typically, you know, for us as scientists, me being a social scientist, you being a natural scientist, being a university professors, and you also a sports executive at the university and being athletic director for some period of time. Typically, we hardly get into talking about what we do for fun. And the Shy Peace Show, the idea is to talk about how do we contribute to a more peaceful Chicago and the world by extension. And one of the ways that we can develop ourselves in peaceology is a scientific study and application of peace and peacefulness in multiple contexts, we say, but it's basically the science and practice of making peace profitable. And the idea is that for us to be able to exist in a peaceful existence and to make peace profitable, meaning depositing peace in ourselves and depositing peace to others, we first of all have to find a way to be peaceful. And when I heard you talking about going up north to fish,
yeah,
I said we have to do a show on this. So tell us why fishing, and maybe you can give us a little bit about how you got into fishing, but
Sure.
even why fishing? Yeah.
Well, I would say this is something that gives me inner peace. I'm not sure if that's just being on the water or around the water, or being close to nature, but whatever problems I have or whatever tensions I have that are internal, as soon as I am involved in this particular hobby, I am totally into that moment, and those problems disappear immediately.
Yes, you know, because sometimes we are in the city or wherever we are, and we feel the pressure. We feel the pressure of life, and we want to disengage. In fact, Jack, on this weekend, we had the Dominican Association of Chicagolands. We had our annual banquet and fundraiser, raising funds for proceeds to go towards the Bahamas in recovery of Hurricane Dorian. And there's a young guy who came to me and he wanted a password for the guest password at North Park so he can get on his iPad. And obviously we do not share our passwords on other people's software, but the guest password is fine. But I didn't know what it was. And I said, you probably do not need that anyway. Don't worry about that. And the kid went out there, and before you know it, he was on the stage dancing and running around with his friends. And I said, just disengage from the technology for a moment and just connect just connect with someone, and that's a major difference. So, and even on the way down here, we were having some connections, and I was asking you, trying to get an understanding of what how you started fishing and how you have continued to maintain doing that. So tell our viewers a little bit about that.
Well, my earliest experiences were primarily with my family. I can remember I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, so around Seattle area, and then also in eastern Washington. But I would say at 3 or 4, my uncle took me out on the dock in the Sound, and he had something called a candle fish, so it was kind of live bait. Didn't catch anything, but I thought, hey, this is kind of fun. Then I'd say my next memory would have been going to my great-grandfather's house in Idaho, Spirit Lake, Idaho. And my dad gave me a little rod, stuck a worm on it, on a hook, and put a little bobber. And the idea, he just said, okay, when the bobber goes under the water, then give it a yank. Well, my dad was off talking to somebody else. I'm there kind of by myself, and the bobber goes down. I give it a yank, and lo and behold, there's a little bluegill. My dad didn't tell me, what do you do with it after you catch it? So now I'm thinking, okay, well, I went by the shore there, and I dug out a little sand and got some water in that little hole and put the little bluegill in the hole. So, okay, we're going to keep it alive until I find out what I'm supposed to do with it. So, yeah, I would say another early memory would have been in eastern Washington. I was probably in 3rd grade, and we were around something called Pothole Reservoir, and again, it was using live bait, so we just went out in the field that was around there, caught grasshoppers, and used grasshoppers as the bait. Phenomenal bait for crappie. So part of this, I think, if you're trying to get somebody interested in fishing, is you want to take them on an outing where they're going to catch something.
Yes.
And if you can do that, they're going to get excited about this as a sport or as a hobby, as a recreational kind of thing. And so I do have memories of catching fish at an early age.
So, aside from catching the fish and having that excitement, are there any memorable things that your father may have said to you, or lessons he may have given in the process of doing that?
Well, one thing that I remember very clearly was he would say to me, son, this helps to grow the bond. So very early in my experience, I'll say as a teenager, we would go fishing in the Sound in the Pacific Northwest. Get up in the wee hours of the morning, like 4 o'clock. By the time we got to the place where we would rent a boat, it would be maybe 5 o'clock, and we would use, typically we would use sardines as bait there, and we would fish for salmon or fish for sole, which is a member of the halibut kind of fish family, and just be out there hours on end. Might be a lot of dead air, or there might be, some comments, but one comment that sticks very clearly in my mind is him saying this helps grow the bond.
Yes, and Jack, as we think about today, we're just talking about the bond with the electronics and telling the kid disconnect a little bit. That and when we're talking pissology about the science and practice of making peace profitable, it's important to bond with yourself, right?
Yes.
And but then even sometimes when you're bonding with yourself, you're really not by yourself, right? Because I remember something we were saying in the car on the way there, that you were talking about the relationship or the interaction between you and the nature,
Yes.
between you and how do you call it? The competition between the species? What do you call it?
I would call it interspecies competition. So you're really trying to figure out how to think like a fish, right?
Yeah.
What would a fish like like today? Is the water clear? Is the water cloudy? Is it sunny? Is it overcast? Low light, high light? What's the bottom of the lake look like? Are there plants around here? Or how deep do I think they're going to be today? All these kinds of things kind of enter into, okay, now I've got a game plan because this is the competition and I'm going to outsmart this.
Folks, you're watching the Shy Peace Show. I'm your host, Dr. Peter K.B. St. Jean, the chair of the Department of Sociology and Criminal Justice at North Park University, and also the Director of Criminal Justice or Chair of Criminal Justice Major in the School of Professional Studies. I'm also the founder and the Executive Director of the Urban Peace Lab. North Park University is a nonprofit organization on the north side of Chicago between Foster and Kedzie, associated with the Evangelical Covenant Church, also affiliated with the Swedish Covenant Hospital that you may be familiar in the Albany Park area of Chicago. So last year I brought Dr. Surridje to talk about genetics and peace, genetics, and sports, and he's a scientist that was an athletic director. He's happily retired, but retired people still work, right? They want to, right? So he's still doing a little bit of...
I'm a consultant.
A little bit of consultant work at North Park. But we just thought we wanted to talk about fishing as a way of introducing the idea that part of our ability to enjoy whole, full peace is our ability to recreate. And actually, I was sharing with Dr. Surridje on the way down here that, I am not, Jack, I have never caught a fish.
Well, we got to change that.
Yeah, we got to change that. I have not I've never caught a fish, but I recreate by listening to a lot of blues and live reggae music, the Kingston Nines and at the Wild here in Chicago. Just on my way down, just decided to go somewhere and to have my mind engage in something other than the mundane, very heavy intellectual things that I think about. So we thought that we would have Dr. Surridje join us today and talk about fishing. I'm sorry that we can't take your calls because I don't have Sarah here with us tonight. Hopefully we'll be able to do this some other time. So Jack, I see here that you have some things here. Tell our viewers.
I brought some toys along.
Sure, you can see right on the screen. Tell our viewers what.
Okay, these are just a few things. This particular one is a topwater lure, and so that actually floats on the top of wherever you're fishing. Okay. And this one is for muskie. So a big fish. And just a real quick story about that specific lure. My brother-in-law, John, is an avid muskie fisherman, and I hadn't fished that much for him. They're very difficult to catch. The story is that you have to make 1,000 casts to catch one fish.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm out with my brother-in-law, and he is telling me, okay, this is a likely place for muskie, and so I'm throwing this specific lure, and I say to my brother-in-law, well, what do they hit like? What do they bite like? It was not 5 seconds later that a muskie hit that specific lure, and it was spectacular.
This famous lure.
So it's just kind of floating along in the water like this, swimming.
It's on top. It stays on top.
On top of the water.
Oh.
And this muskie took it sideways like this.
What's a muskie?
It's in the pike family. Is a muskalung is the fish, but it's a large fish. I'd say a trophy-sized muskie would be in the 50-inch range, probably 35 pounds, something like that. So that's a big fish lure.
So how did you get it back?
Well, this particular one was my first legal muskie. They have to be over 30 inches to be legal. I released it anyway, but it was a good-sized fish, probably 15 pounds.
Yeah, right. So Jack, if somebody never fished before, I can probably say that I never really fished because not catching a fish, but I've gone with someone and they had a pole, and I held the pole in the water.
Yeah.
I may have cast it, but I never like to say, got home, got ready, got in the car, went to play, you know. So I can't say that I never put a line in the water.
So kind of what do you need?
Yeah, so how you begin?
Okay, well, I would say this is a unique in that you could invest in gear that would allow you to catch fish at a very good price point. So, I mean, under $50, you can get everything you need. So from, and again, my first suggestion would be that you never buy anything unless it's on sale. So I don't ever buy this stuff for full price, but this is actually a fairly good time to do things at the end of a season. They will have closeouts on things, so if you went to a place like Bass Pro Shop or something like that, they would have these kinds of things, or there are other vendors that you may be aware of. So buy a combination. I would suggest getting a light rod and reel combination. They come together. When I'm saying combination, don't buy them separately, because the vendors match the reel to the rod. You're not trying to figure that out. I would say light gear because you want to be able to fish for smaller fish that are more abundant. So things like panfish. You'll need some, usually this combination will come with a line, but you may need to buy some hooks and some weights. And I would say a bobber. That's the easiest way to learn. My experience...
What's a bobber?
Okay, this is like, they're either made out of balsa wood, which floats, or they're plastic. The one that you would see most often is like red and white, red out on the top and white on the bottom. No, I don't have one of those in here, but you would put the bait on the hook and have some weight there to get that to sink. You'd have the bobber up higher so that, there, we got bobbers. You would want that to try to anticipate what depth those fish are swimming at. So we're trying to entice them into biting something. My experience has been that live bait is the best. So, and it's something as simple as worms. That might be angleworm, it might be night crawlers, it might be wax worms.
So here we show your viewers, we're showing them what a bobber is. I'm seeing my first bobber. You introduced him to a whole lot of stuff there, Jack. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I gotta get you in the boat. That's what we gotta do.
Yeah, you gotta do that. You gotta change that, yeah.
So, I think if you're fishing for a particular kind of fish, then the best kind of live bait's going to vary somewhat, but night crawlers are the best across the board for freshwater fishing. Now, if you happen to have the opportunity to fish marine fishing, so saltwater fishing, I think the best bait is shrimp.
Oh, wow.
You can buy live shrimp, and you never know what you're going to catch with them, but all kinds of different species of marine fish will eat shrimp. So that's a great bait. There are some that maybe prefer a different kind of thing in marine fishing. So a little crab about this big is something that, ironically, a fish as big as a tarpon likes to eat them. I mean, they're like candy. And my wife Mary and I had an extraordinary experience fishing for tarpon in Key West, where we had the chance to go out with a guide, and we had 8 fish on in a half a day of fishing. And you're talking about a fish that's over 100 pounds, between 100 and 180 pounds, that comes completely out of the water. I mean, it was a very good day.
Yeah. So, again, folks, we are watching the Surridje Show. My guest today is Dr. Jack Surridje of North Park University. I am now working as a consultant. Before that, athletics director, been a professor of different science subjects, a good friend, and we had a show last year on genetics and sports, and we just wanted to talk about the recreated. And I'm learning so much. And he said he's going to change my life. I will no longer be someone who has a trophy for not catching a fish. Soon I'll be someone with a trophy for catching a fish. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Sorry we can't take your calls tonight, but we are happy that you can watch our show, and you could also view. I'll show you in a minute our website, and you can go to www.shypeace.net, and you will see our shows. Our shows will be archived. You'll see Jack last year. You'll see all of our shows for different years. I'll show you that in a minute. But are there places, Jack, around Chicago to fish? Are there good places to fish?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you got the whole lakeshore, Lake Michigan.
And what type of fish you can get?
So there are a lot of different types of fish, but there are a lot of bass in near the shore on Lake Michigan. And so there are lagoons, there are piers that you can go out on, there are concrete abutments that you could use. Just a lot of things in the city that would make that possible. So we're not short on opportunity there, even if you're just within the city. If you can get out of the city, then there are all kinds of opportunities. I am partial to Wisconsin and Minnesota. Also have been for the last 30 years or 35 years been fortunate enough to go to Canada to fish. And that's where I've fished for my favorite target fish, and that would be walleye.
On the way down here, we were talking about fishing, and I asked you, and you were telling me about salmon. There's salmon in the water in Chicago?
Oh, yeah. In Lake Michigan, there are salmon. So coho, or silver salmon, king salmon, they're all kind of in a trout family, and there are some big lake trout, and there are rainbow trout. All of those fish are in Lake Michigan.
So what is the difference between like lake fishing and how do you call it? Not ocean?
Marine or saltwater fishing? Well, you have to have sturdier gear if you're saltwater fishing, just because it will, if you don't buy good equipment, it's going to corrode. And that can be problematic. So you have to be very careful after you fish, when you saltwater fish, to rinse your gear, because that salt will get into the gears and so forth, and you can have a pretty short half-life of good fishing equipment if you don't take care of it.
So, Jack, we have almost, can you imagine, about 2 minutes left to go.
Okay.
Can you tell me of a memorable, funny moment that you had fishing?
Oh, my goodness. I guess one that comes to mind was, this is many, many years ago, but I had a boat that I was having some problems with the steering mechanism. And it just seemed too loose. It wasn't responding very well. So I'm, thinking, okay, I can do something about this. And so I actually took what was a wire off the coil or spool that was the steering on this boat. And then I proceeded to put it back on the spool and started the boat up, and I'm going straight for a while, and now I turn, and it goes the opposite way. Here I had put the cable back onto the steering mechanism the opposite way that it should have been. You can imagine what your mind does at a time like that, where you're turning right and the thing is actually going left. So
maybe
that was
just turned around and they should back up.
Yeah, right.
Maybe then all of a sudden backing up would feel right.
Oh my goodness! Thankfully, I didn't run into anybody or anything, and just was able to shut the boat down and put it back on there the right way.
So is fishing for anybody? Can anybody fish for the most part?
I believe it. Of course, I'm passionate about it, so I would probably try to convince anybody it's a great recreation, and it is something that you can get into for a relatively low investment. I think some people take up golf. Well, that's a lot more pricey. Not just the equipment, but to play it. You can fish for free.
Yes.
All you got to do is get a license.
You can fish for free.
That's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our show. I'm Dr. Peter K.B. St. Jean, Chair of the Department of Sociology and Criminal Justice, Director of Criminal Justice Major, School of Professional Studies at North Park University. My guest, Dr. Jack Surridje. Thank you so much for being here. Talking about fishing. I feel relaxed. I feel peaceful. And we will see you next week with a surprise guest. Take good care. Bye-bye.